Good evening, everyone. So I guess I'll begin by giving us a quotation from Lam Tsongkhapa, who says, all the different types of karma, black and white, they originate from your intention. When intention is good, it goes in the good direction. When intention is bad, all bad things come from it. Therefore, you see that everything depends on your intention. So basically what it says is that whatever we do, whether we talk in terms of dharma or whether we talk about worldly activities, motivation is extremely important. So this whole thing that we say in terms of dharma, whether it is Hinayana or Mahayana, definitely depends on the motivation. But also we see that when we engage in worldly activities, you must have intention, you must have motivation. And if you're well motivated, properly motivated to carry out this activity, then the results also will be good, will be satisfactory. Just as this is true for worldly ordinary activities, it is also very true in terms of dharma. So as Lama Tsongkhapa has said, all the karma, black and white, good and bad, has originated from something. Where does it originate from? It originates from the motivation, or it depends on the motivation. When this motivation is correct, is good, then everything goes into the right direction. Everything is done properly. But when the motivation is bad, so it means when we are afflicted by afflictions, ignorance, and so forth, then obviously the karma we create and so forth will be negative. Okay, so as we say here, we're here to receive some teachings on the stages of the path of the Lam Rim. We know that the original text was the text by Master Atisha, the Lamp to the Path. And then from there, we have a number of texts composed by Je Tsongkhapa. So we have the extensive Lam Rim Chenmo, the middle length Lam Rim, and we have here the Song of Experience. So it is possible that different people engage the Lam Rim, the practice of the Lam Rim, with different motivation. So you could have a person who is influenced by bodhicitta and is thinking that I aspire to reach the state of Buddhahood in order to be able to benefit all mother sentient beings who are as vast as the vastness of space. To that end, I come here to listen, to reflect to, and to meditate on the stages of the path. And I will listen to all the practices and I will practice all these practices of the three scopes. So you have one type of individual who might be thinking like this. Then you could have a second type of individual that is thinking, actually, omniscience is a very big goal. I don't think this is for me, but definitely I'm interested in the state of liberation. I would like to obtain the state of an arhat. So this is a type of person who is influenced by renunciation, and they say, influenced by that renunciation, I will come here to listen, reflect, and meditate on all the stages of the path, the entire Lam Rim. Then we have a third type of individual who is not thinking about omniscience, is not thinking about liberation. They're just thinking, how can I make sure that in my next life I have a good rebirth, a rebirth as a human or a god. So that person is mainly preoccupied with avoiding the suffering in the lower migrations. And this is a valid thought because actually the suffering in the lower migrations is quite intense. So you have a person who is just seeking a good rebirth in the next life. They're just seeking to avoid the suffering of the lower migrations. And they say, motivated with this thought, they say, I will come to listen, reflect, and meditate on the Lam Rim. And then finally, we have the fourth type of person who is not interested in any of the previous thoughts that the other people had, but they just think, okay, in this life, I want to make sure that through my activities, I will have a long life. I will have life without sickness. I will have wealth and comfort and so forth. So for this reason, I will come and listen, reflect to, and meditate on the Lam Rim. So as you can see here, we have four different types of individuals, and they are motivated by completely different intentions. In the first case, where we have a person who is influenced by bodhicitta, even if that bodhicitta is not uncontrived, even if it is contrived bodhicitta, if they engage this practice of the Lam Rim, then definitely this practice becomes Mahayana Dharma. In the case of the second individual, where the person is influenced by renunciation, actually we cannot say that this becomes Mahayana Dharma. However, it becomes the Dharma of the individual of the middle scope. When we come to the third individual, because the motivation is to only seek a good rebirth in the future, the Dharma that they practice does not become Mahayana. It does not become the Dharma of the middle scope, but it becomes only a practice that can protect them from the suffering of the lower migrations. And then finally, we come to the fourth type of individual, where we see the type of motivation they have. So obviously, this will not become a Mahayana practice, will not become a practice of the middle scope, of the small scope, or even protect them from the things, from the suffering of the lower migrations and so forth. So therefore, you see, the motivation is what will influence the scope, the size of the results, the type of intention, the accumulation, and so forth. So it is very important. We always stress that there are certain things that are important during the time of preparation, and then we have the actual carrying of activities, and then we have the concluding activities. And at the beginning, we always stress that the motivation is very important. So the motivation is very important because we see that according to the motivation, we have a different capacity, and obviously we will establish different results. So when we talk about the motivation, we stress again and again that it's very important as much as possible to make the effort to generate the bodhicitta motivation, to be influenced by bodhicitta. And of course, it's not easy to generate bodhicitta within our mind stream, but definitely we can familiarize ourselves, at least with the idea of bodhicitta. That idea that says it doesn't matter what happens to me, what is the most important is to always benefit and protect others. If we familiarize ourselves with this thought again and again, as the time progresses, when eventually we strengthen that attitude, and even when in the future we find ourselves in a very difficult situation where there is very intense suffering involved, we will find that naturally we have that reaction. Naturally, we have that thought that says, it doesn't matter what happens to me. Let me see how I can help and benefit others. So it is an issue of training, right? It's something that can be developed. Sometimes people, when they hear that presentation, they take it to mean that when I develop bodhicitta, I have to completely let go of myself and only look at others. But this is not the case. This is a misunderstanding. What we say here is that by establishing the purpose or the benefit of others, indirectly, your own needs, your own purpose and benefit are also established. Indirectly, automatically, they will be taken care of. It is the same thing that we see in ordinary life, in society, when you have a person who is always providing for the family, let's say a husband that provides for the wife, for the children, for other members of the family. By taking care of their needs, actually they take care of his needs as well. So the individual who cares for others is also cared for. We know that. This is how it works. So in our teachings, again and again, we find mention of bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is emphasized all the time because bodhicitta is the life force of the Mahayana. And it's very important that we place as many imprints of bodhicitta in our mind. Right now, we have obtained the precious human rebirth, and on the basis of this life, in the basis of this existence, we have plenty of opportunity to cultivate imprints, to place imprints of bodhicitta, right? So in this world, there is sometimes you meet people who say, I'm a Buddhist. But if you ask them the question, like, okay, and what is the core practice of Buddhism? They will say, I don't know. I don't know what is Buddha Dharma. Sometimes we hear things like this. So also, for example, we might find people who have every intention to engage those teachings, but they are in an unfortunate situation where the external conditions are not in place. So, for example, you see in India, in Thailand, and so forth, although people are willing to engage in Mahayana, it's difficult to find Mahayana teachers or to have a teacher there for a long time. So, in comparison to these type of situations, consider how fortunate you are that you are in Singapore, where there is an abundance of Mahayana teachers and where the teachings are flowing, so to speak, and therefore you have every opportunity with the inner presence of those teachers who give this type of teachings to always place virtuous imprints, to always place imprints of bodhicitta and enhance and develop those again and again. So when we say we place imprints for bodhicitta, now we need to be realistic. To obtain Buddhahood in one lifetime is something which is very hard. I mean, some individuals have been successful in doing this, and by all means, you should try as hard as you can to obtain. See, maybe you can obtain it in one life. However, for the majority of people, what happens is that in this life, that we have all these fortunate conditions, we place the imprints, and eventually those imprints will develop and come into fruition later on, bringing about the result of Buddhahood. Bodhicitta alone is not enough, although we really emphasize it. Definitely we need renunciation and we need correct view. We need that if you have bodhicitta, but you're lacking the wisdom realizing emptiness, you will not obtain Buddhahood. Because in order to obtain Buddhahood, you must have both types of accumulation. And by cultivating the wisdom realizing emptiness, we develop the accumulation of wisdom. On the other hand, by developing bodhicitta, we have the accumulation of merit. And ultimately, we will combine the two, and through the union of the two accumulations, we will obtain the state of Buddhahood. But definitely cultivating the wisdom realizing emptiness is crucial, because in this way we develop and enhance an antidote that allows us to gradually overcome mistaken, afflictions, mistaken views, and afflictions and mistaken views, and in this way, by abandoning them stage after stage, eventually we will be able to totally remove them. So, coming back again to the importance of bodhicitta, to stress how important it is to develop it as our motivation. So it's very important, as we say, to train in bodhicitta. We have to train in bodhicitta, as we will see later on in the text. We will find the methods. There are two methods: the sevenfold cause and effect method, and the method of equalizing and exchanging self for others that came down from Manjushri to Master Shantideva. So the important thing is that when we describe all these different types of trainings and meditations and so forth, to identify and say, oh, this is talking about me. Right? I have obtained this precious human rebirth. I'm here now. I have all this opportunity to listen, to practice, to do whatever. So when it says, when I hear in the teachings that one should meditate on correct view, it is not talking about other people. Other people should meditate on correct view. It's about me. I am the one who has to meditate on correct view. Similarly, when I hear encouragement about how important it is to meditate on bodhicitta, I should not be thinking, oh, this is for some other people out there. No, it is for me. I have to meditate on bodhicitta. And similarly, I am the one who has to meditate on renunciation. You have to become your own teacher. And becoming your own teacher, examine constantly with recollection and introspection. Turn inwardly and examine your mind. Within the course of 24 hours, millions of thoughts pass through our mind. It's just that we are not trained to recognize what is happening, all this traffic. Okay, so our task here is to identify what type of thoughts pass through the mind, stop the bad ones, and enhance the virtuous ones. So to give you an example, something happens and you are inspired to practice generosity. So you have this motivation that says, oh, I should support this cause. So you reach into your wallet and you see what money you have into your wallet, and you have $100 note, and you're about to give that, and then you have the thought says, oh no, 100 is too much. I'm not giving that much. That's too much. Okay, so catch that thought that says that's too much, because this is a negative thought. This is limiting you. your initial motivation is to practice generosity. So as you say, I will practice generosity, together with that, you also have other thoughts that say, no, that's too much, and so forth, that limit you. So stop whatever limits you and enhance the thought within you that says, I should give, I want to give generously. So very important in this life to minimize as much as we can our desire and to have a sense of contentment, right? It is very difficult because we all fantasize, isn't it? We all have ideas that run through our mind. Most of the people thinking, I want to become famous, I want to be powerful, I want to be wealthy, I want to be, I want to be someone important, right? So it's almost like a dream that is running through our mind. However, to achieve those things, you have to understand it's extremely difficult because, of course, it depends on the type of karma you have created in your previous life, on the type of merit you have accumulated, and favorable conditions around you. All of those things have to align for you to establish your desire, whatever you desire, right? Whether it is small or big. And this is usually very difficult for all of those things to come together. And even if you were to do some important work and become famous, together with that, you know that there will always be other people who will criticize you, they will antagonize you, they will debate with you, they will say that you did wrong, they would go against what you're trying to achieve and so forth. So there are always unfavorable conditions, no matter how many favorable you have established. So as we say, in our life, we have to reduce our desire. But when it comes into our Dharma practice and Dharma activities, the bigger the desire is better, the bigger the ambition is better. So to cultivate the thoughts that say, one day I will have treasures and I will provide to all sentient beings, I will take care of all sentient beings. I will reach liberation. I will reach the state of Buddhahood. I will take care of each and every sentient being, and so forth. So to have ambition and great desire in Dharma is very good, because when you have this, you create what we call the great wave of accumulation. Okay, so in verse number 7, we started last week. It says, among instructions, it is the most precious of all gems, fulfilling all the wishes of beings without exception. So we talk about what it means to fulfill the needs of sentient beings. So definitely here, we're not talking about providing for sentient beings for the time being, taking care, maybe of some material need or some immediate need. No, we're talking about ultimately and in the future, completely taking care of the needs of all sentient beings. And that comes up from becoming a practitioner of the Lam Rim, because if you are someone who begins, first of all, by relying on the spiritual teacher, and then enter this path by contemplating the precious and the rarity of the precious human rebirth, and then the law of death and impermanence, the law of cause and effect, and so forth, you can develop all the realizations and up until to the point of reaching the state of Buddhahood. Then, in addition to that, you can enter Tantra and reach the state of Vajradhara. And in this way, when you obtain these type of results, you will be able to provide ultimate happiness for each and every sentient being. So this is the meaning of the second line in the English translation. You fulfill the wishes of all beings without exception. And then the first line says, among instructions, it is the most precious of gems. So it is like the wish-fulfilling jewel, where that can provide anything that you want for, anything that you wish for. So these instructions of the Lam Rim, if you rely upon them, definitely you can build up your practice, and it will give you all the happiness and the joy and the realizations and the accumulation that you need. It is like a wish-fulfilling jewel that provides this type of inner wealth for yourself. Continuing with the remaining of the verse, it says, it is also the ocean of the most glorious, well-uttered insights, the co-influence of 1,000 rivers of excellent treatises. So here we have this analogy of many rivers coming and gathering into the ocean. So they come from different parts, but they all come and fall into the same body of water, the ocean. And this is an analogy of all the teachings, the 84,000 bundles of teachings, the Prajnaparamita teachings, the teachings of the great Indian scholars. Basically, they all come into the Lam Rim. And what that indicates is that by relying on the Lam Rim, we will be able to access and have develop insights on these texts. Right now, as beginners, if we were to try to engage the 84,000 bundles of teachings, or if we were to try to read and comprehend the Prajnaparamita texts, we would not be able to do that. However, if we approach it from the Lam Rim, we will be able to progress along the path and generate in the future. If we study now, we will be able to generate all these realizations of the grounds and paths and have insight on all these texts. And therefore, it says it's the most glorious and well-uttered insights, right? So, because it is the best advice that we have, and by relying on this, it gives us access to all the realizations. So we'll continue with the next verse, number 8. It helps you see all teachings as free of contradiction. It helps all scriptures dawn on you as personal instruction. It helps you easily discover the enlightened intention of the conquerors, and it helps protect you from the abyss of great negative deeds. With this verse, we are discussing the 4 greatness of the Lam Rim and the 3 features of the Lam Rim. So these 4 types of greatness are greatness that apply to all Lam Rim texts. It doesn't, irrespective of the length of the text. So they apply to Lam Rim Chenmo, to the middle Lam Rim, to the short Lam Rim equally. The first one, it says it helps you see all teachings as free of contradiction. So in terms of the teachings, we have the transmitted teachings and the realized teachings. So here, contradiction might appear in the mind in terms of the transmitted teachings. Okay, that is because in certain occasions, the Buddha taught that there is a self. In other occasions, he taught that there is no self. In some occasions, he said that phenomena are established from their own characteristics. And in other occasions, he said that phenomena are not established from their own characteristics. To some individuals, he said that desire is to be abandoned, whilst to other individuals, he said that desire is to be relied upon because this is the method for reaching the state of Vajradhara. Okay, so obviously, one might initially think that there is contradiction in those statements, but what we have to understand is that all of this is instruction for one individual to go from the beginning and traverse the entire path until they reach the state of Buddhahood. So, in the text by Bapom Karamche, Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, you can see there are he gives many examples and anecdotes to explain this first greatness of the Lam Rim, that you will come to understand all the teachings as being free of contradiction. So it gives, first of all, the example of a person who is suffering from heat disorder in the body, and they go to see a doctor and they describe their symptoms, and the doctor says, oh, I can see, okay, so there is some excessive heat element in your body, so for a while you should not eat any meat or drink alcohol. Okay, so the person takes this advice, they go back home, they modify the diet, and as a result of that, their condition improves. So next time they go to see the doctor, they say, yes, that heat imbalance, that excessive heat that I have is now totally under control. However, I seem to be suffering from wind imbalance. Sometimes my head is spinning and so forth. So the doctor examines them and says, yes, I can see there is some wind imbalance. So now the cure for that is that you need to add meat and alcohol to your diet. Okay, so this might sound contradictory to you because it is the same patient and it is the same doctor, and at the beginning of the month they said no meat, no alcohol. At the end of the month they said now you need meat and alcohol. That appears to be contradictory. However, what the doctor does is gives whatever is most beneficial according to the time, according to the occasion. So what was beneficial earlier on is not necessarily what would be beneficial later on. Okay, so the beneficial at the earlier time is not the same as the beneficial in the later time. And this is exactly what happens with the advice that Buddha Shakyamuni has given. So having total knowledge and understanding of the predisposition, the capacity, and the interest of those who came to receive teachings, he has taught according to their needs, according to the occasion. All right, so at some times it was important to say that there is a self to particular individuals. Later on, as they progress, he introduced them to the idea that there is no self. At occasions, he said that samsara is something that needs to be abandoned. It needs to be avoided at any cost. But then at other times, in other occasions, he said that for Arya Bodhisattvas, it is extremely beneficial and advisable to take rebirth in samsara again and again in order to benefit sentient beings. So the actual verse is, the teachings are twofold. They're transmitted and they're realized. And what is given in the transmitted teachings, the subject matter, is exclusively to be put into practice. Okay, so as we say, the Buddha has taught different things, having complete knowledge of the predisposition and the interest of those who listen. So for that reason, it is very important that we make the distinction between what is the intention of the Buddha and what is, let's say, the intention of the sutra. They're not always the same thing. So, for example, when a sutra is giving a teaching that there is a self, this is the intention of the sutra, but this is not the intention of the Buddha. Or when you have a presentation of three vehicles, the vehicles of the hearers, the solitary realizers, and the Mahayana vehicle, this presentation of the three vehicles is the intention of the sutra, not the intention of the Buddha. The intention of the Buddha is that there is only one vehicle, and that is the Mahayana vehicle. Then when we have proclamations that say that all compounded phenomena are impermanent, all contaminated phenomena are in the nature of suffering, that phenomena are empty and selfless, and that nirvana is pacification, this is actually both the intention of the sutra and the intention of the Buddha. So as you see, we have to interpret and explain whether this is the intention of the Buddha, the final intention of the Buddha, or not. Also, within the Lam Rim, you see that we have these terms that indicate that. So we have paths that are shared with the individual of the small scope. We have paths that are shared with the individual of the middle scope. And then we have the paths of the great scope, of the individual of the great scope. So we find the word shared for the first and the second case. But when it comes to the practices of the great scope, we don't use the word shared. Now, when we use the word shared in the first and the second case, this indicates that they are not just the practices of the individual of the small scope or just the practices of the individual of the middle scope. They indicate that they are also like preliminary practices of the individual of the great scope. All right. So you could have someone who is influenced by bodhicitta and needs to train, but definitely they must go through the stage of seeing all the suffering in the lower migrations and making the decision that no, in my next life I want to avoid rebirth in the lower migrations. I need to be reborn either as a god or a human. Okay, so this is a path or a training that is shared with the individual of the small scope. So the bodhisattva has to do this as an earlier part of their training. So talking about the common, what is common and what is exclusive. Also, Geshe gave the example of this room that you are in, drop a link right now. So this is a common assembly place. It's not a private area. Anyone can come here and listen to the teachings. So that is common, that is shared with all the people, which is different from, what is happening in your own private house, isn't it? Okay, so as we say, Buddha Shakyamuni has taught out of omniscience exactly according to the predispositions and the interest and the inclinations of the different disciples. Therefore, he could tailor the teachings so that the teachings would be of the most benefit to specific individuals at specific times of their life, of their development. So as we say, for beginners, The presentation was very strict about samsara, that samsara is full of faults, full of sufferings and shortcomings. Therefore, samsara is something that needs to be abandoned. We need to develop renunciation and aim to obtain the state of liberation. However, to Arya Bodhisattvas, the Buddha gave strict teachings and advice, saying you must take rebirth again and again into samsara in order to bring about the benefit of sentient beings in a great scale. So you have to understand here that taking rebirth can happen through different ways. You might take rebirth out of karma and afflictions, or you might take rebirth out of your prayers and your aspiration prayers and your compassion. So in the case of bodhisattvas, it's not through karma and afflictions, Arya bodhisattvas, it is through prayer and compassion. So as in the second chapter of the ornament, there is also a presentation of different secondary methods of taking care of sentient beings, and these utilize the path of desire. So, for example, the example that is given is that a highly developed bodhisattva might take rebirth into samsara as a universal monarch, get married, and then give birth to thousands of children. Right? So that is one way, one type of activity of benefiting sentient beings at this level. But definitely for beginners, we are given the advice that desire and hatred and pride and so forth, all of those things are afflictions and need to be avoided. However, for other individuals, the path that utilizes desire is something that is emphasized. So we have an example of this of King Indrabhuti, who was living in ancient India at the time of the Buddha, but these days the area where he was living is in Afghanistan. All right, so one day he saw the Buddha and his entourage of arhats flying up in the sky, because someone had invited the Buddha and his retinue and was offering meal to them, but the distance was quite far. And back at that time, the only means of travel were, by road, and that would take a very long time. So the Buddha and his disciples, the close circle, they just flew to go to the place where they were invited. And King Indrabhuti, he looked up in the sky and he saw all these flying, beings, and he said, "What is this? What is happening here?" And someone explained to him, this is the Buddha and his close followers. They are flying to go somewhere because they have been invited for lunch. And King Indrabhuti said, "If I invite them, will they also come?" And the person said, "Yes, invite, and the Buddha will come." So King Indrabhuti invited the Buddha, and the Buddha arrived with his retinue, and King Indrabhuti, offers service and food and so forth. And having made the offering, said, "Please, can you give me teachings on how to bring desire into the path?" And this is when the Buddha gave the Guhya Samaja Tantra, initiated King Indrabhuti. And so as you can see, if you have the merit and if this is the suitable path for you, this is what the Buddha will teach. And you can see that if you practice to the level of purifying negativities and obscurations, actually you will not need an aeroplane. You can just fly wherever you need to go. Actually, by developing calm abiding, for example, we know that the body becomes very light and you can fly as a result of that, or you can develop special insight. And in this, you can develop the state of omniscience where you can see and you can know all phenomena. You don't need to rely on a microscope or any lab analysis like the scientists do. So it all depends on developing along the path on the basis of Dharma practice. It's actually very important that we aspire to achieve those things and we make prayers to achieve these states. So we mentioned here King Indrabhuti, who received the Guhya Samaja initiation. So obviously we're talking about Tantra here. It's important to understand that although we have a presentation of reaching Buddhahood within the sutric scope, as we say that Mahayana is the final vehicle, within Mahayana we have Sutra Mahayana and Tantra Mahayana, is the ultimate vehicle. So this is what we need to engage. Okay, so as we say, we're explaining the first of those lines, the first of the greatnesses of the Lam Rim, that you will see all teachings as being free of contradiction. We have given the example of the medicine, what medicine is appropriate earlier on and later on. As the health state develops. So we need to understand that all of this advice is what one individual needs to practice in order to reach the state of Buddhahood. So we have talked, we mentioned that when we talk about the teachings, we have two. We have the transmitted teachings, and then we have the realized teachings. We have explained the transmitted teachings, but also we need to talk about the realized teachings. So, for example, any vows that you have within your mind stream, these are considered to be realized teachings. If you have the lay vows of abandoning the 10 non-virtuous action, or, for example, if you have Genyen vows, or if you have vows of ordination, right? And with introspection and recollection, you're aware of your promises and your vows, and you say, today I will not lie, today I will not harm everyone, today I will not kill, today I will only practice virtue, today I will avoid this, I will avoid that, and so forth. When you have that recollection, along with according to your vows, then you have the realized teachings. We'll keep talking about the graduated stages of the path to enlightenment, right? So the Lam Rim that leads to enlightenment. So it's very important to look at this future enlightenment. That is the state where all qualities have been developed, and aspire to reach that. And, set this as a goal and say, every day I'm familiarizing myself with this practice because this is where I'm aiming. But it's important to understand that this enlightenment for us is a future event. Buddha Shakyamuni has already reached enlightenment, and these realizations already exist within his mind stream, but we have not developed these realizations. We have not reached there yet. So we need to rely upon the stages of the path, to listen, to contemplate, to meditate on them, to generate these realizations one after the other, starting from the correct way to rely on the teacher, and so on and so forth, as we progress down the path. So we need to do all that so that in the future we will reach the state of enlightenment. But the incredible feature of the Lam Rim is, of this type of text, is that it presents all the stages of the path in the correct order in a way that is very easy for a beginner to recognize, to say, okay, this is number 1, number 2, number 3, and very easy to engage. We mentioned before that great classical texts, such as, for example, the Ornament of Realization, they contain all this instruction of the Lam Rim. However, unless you are a great scholar of the ornament, you will not be able to say where is the instruction on how to rely on the teacher, on which chapter, on which verse, where is it, please, I can't find it. Or, where is the instruction about the precious human rebirth? Or where is the instruction about death and impermanence? It doesn't come in an order, in a systematic manner, and you cannot recognize those passages. Whilst in the Lam Rim, for us beginners, it's like easy to digest. It's everything laid out in a very easy way to follow and immediately engage in that practice. Okay, so the other important element here is that all this instruction of the stages of the path has come down from Buddha Shakyamuni in an unbroken lineage. As we say, we have 3 lineages of instruction. One is the lineage of profound view, the other one is the lineage of extensive practice, and the third one is the lineage of blessed practice. And all this, the 3 lineages of Lam Rim instruction has reached to our days in an unbroken continuum. It is important to stress this because some of the teachings of the Buddha, the lineage has been broken, such as, for example, the lineage of bestowing full ordination, highest level of ordination, to nuns. And there is quite a lot of effort these days by various individuals to reintroduce this tradition, but we always need to keep in mind that the lineage has been broken. However, in the case of the Lam Rim, as we say, from Buddha Shakyamuni going down to okay, if we go into the lineage of extensive deeds, it goes into Maitreya, to Asanga, to Nagarjuna, to Asanga, to Master Selimba, to Master Atisha, and from there to Tibet, into various great lamas. For the lineage of profound view, it goes from Manjushri. Basically, it is the transmission of the Prajnaparamita text, the three mothers, the extensive, the middling, and the short, from 10,000 verses down to 8,000, from 100,000 verses, 10,000 verses, 8,000 verses. It goes down to from Nagarjuna to Chandrakirti, to Vidyakokila, to Serlumpa, to Atisha, from there to Tibet, in Tibet from various scholars down to Lama Tsongkhapa, and it has reached us again in uninterrupted fashion. All right, we see it here. Thank you.